All right, class, let's start talking about materials. I'm using the Soul Reaver that I worked on in a previous class tutorial. Since then, I've done a little bit more work on it. I've got the cross guard, the hilt, the grip, and the pommel all set on it. And it's all made out of the same mesh. Because this is no longer symmetrical front to back, I've actually applied the mirror modifier on this. If you think that your modifier no longer needs to exist as a modifier and you want to make it real, you can apply them. Control A will apply it and make it real. I still want my subdivision to be optional without having to make that real yet. I want to still work with limited geometry. But you can see I added like the skull motif and the little claws off to the side, as long as the grip and the whatnot. For this, I want to start talking about how we can start adding some materials. So let me take a look at where I left my lighting and what we get when we render the scene. Oh, it's terrible. That's terrible. Let's take a look at these lights again. And I'm going to, what do my lights look like? That's 1,000. That's 1,000. And there's a slightly different color, but it's extremely bright. I may have actually changed what my renderers are. Yeah, let's go back to cycles. Oh, that's a lot of work. No, let's go back to Eevee. These different renderers have different properties, different features, but still all work off the same data that we have here. So yeah, I'm going to just move these further away. I lost all the, I need to find a nice balance here so we can see what we're trying to see. Oh, and the background color I changed. That I definitely want to adjust the world. Is the world where? Yeah, let's just make that more of a medium gray. There we are. That's what the issue was. The background color was all kinds of off. All right, so there's my my Soul Reaver. The tip kind of gets lost in the void, but let's start working on making this thing a little bit nicer to look at. So if I click on my reference image, I'm just going to grab it and move it off to the side so I can reference what the actual image looks like. And I can try to see if I can match some of the color and texture. So right away I'm seeing that the grip here looks like some sort of metallic brown or brass. The skull looks like skull material. The blade is polished steel, and then we've got some chrome steel on the side and the chrome steel pommel. So let's start seeing how we can start making those materials. First, the blade's the biggest part of this. Let's start trying to make the blade material. So with my object selected, I'm going to go over to my materials or object materials button, the little beach ball here, material properties, and I'm going to make a new material that I'm going to apply to this. Now with this material, it has all these default settings, and if I render this, it's pretty much what we have with nothing applied. It's the nothing applied goes by these defaults anyway. This is the materials data set. This is the BSDF, which is based on some open standard that is also used by Pixar and Disney and a bunch of other tools. So in theory, if you're working with any other 3D modeling package or support tool, if they speak SDF or BSDF, you should be able to one-to-one use their settings here. Now, depending on your renderer, that may not always get the same effects. As I said, those can play with these numbers differently. But let's go through what these options mean. Ooh, if I full screen it, it's ugly. Well, let me just make it a larger part of the screen. So we're going to focus over here on this right-hand side for now. The first one, and as the obvious, is the base color. Now, what do we want our system to look like, or our object to look like? Since this is meant to be a blade, most steel is in the gray scale, so I'm going to pull it down to a gray, a nice medium gray. Now the whole thing is now this medium gray. We have this property called subsurface. I talked about this slightly when I was talking about lighting. Subsurface or subsurface scattering is a model or a technique or an algorithm, however you want to look at it, that tries to emulate how a real world material is not usually ever perfectly solid, meaning that light will pass not just on it and bounce off or through it if it's glass. It will bounce around inside an object. Like if you shine a bright light on, like if you're in a dark room and you've got a flashlight, or you're in your phone's flashlight and you put your finger over the flashlight, you will see through your finger. That light will bounce around inside your finger and it will be changed by the colors of the materials that are inside your physical flesh, which is why it'll turn a bit more reddish and orangish, as inside our bodies is meat and blood and all those things that are that same kind of color range. But if you, without even having that kind of a strong light on your own hand, if you look at it now, and this is regardless of race, although some skin tones will absorb more light and reflect back more than others. But the skin tone, the pigments, the melanin content in your skin will also affect that. And even with just the ambient light in your room, light is penetrating your flesh, bouncing around, and then re-emerging from your flesh somewhere else. Now, the greater the intensity of the light and the more transparent the material, the further away it'll get. So subsurface scattering and subsurface radius are ways you can adjust that. Now, this is how you can create, like if you wax will absorb some light, but then it almost looks like it emits light because the light particles from the flame of a candle will penetrate the wax, bounce around, be changed by the wax, and then emit further away from the wick, making the top of the candle look like it's glowing more than, say, the bottom of the candle. That is the concept of subsurface scattering. Looking at my Skull Reaver here, I'm probably not going to need subsurface scattering on most of it, but maybe that skull motif does look like it's bone, and bone is one of the materials that will scatter a little bit. Usually organics, woods do it just a little bit. Metals do it very little. They're a very good job of reflecting light and not absorbing it until it gets quite hot, rather. The subsurface scattering color. So again, if you're trying to emulate flesh, you'd want this to be like a fleshy color. The index of refraction. So how much the light will bend away from how much it will be refracted as it goes through there. Subsurface anisotropic. It's like a post-processing effect to blur or blend the effects nicer or not. Metallic is kind of a cheat. Metallic is a kind of a combination of both specular and surface roughness. So between specular and roughness, going back to my lighting discussion, when I talked about how some light, when it hits a material, will reflect perfectly. That's what specular will control, how much of the light reflects perfectly. And then how much of it will get modified and bounced around in different colors by the surface material. That is what we would call diffuse lighting when we're trying to do the calculations. But as far as Blender is concerned, we're adjusting the surface's quote-unquote roughness to make it more reflective. So the less rough something is, the tighter the specularity. The higher the specularity is, the brighter the light that reflects off of it will look. So let's take a look at the render real quick. And let me zoom in on this. These little bright spots are specular bits. The rest of it is diffuse bits. Let's mess with the material properties. This is why I do the materials and the lighting back to back, because they are very much intertwined. Let me increase the roughness and now render it. And zoom in, and you will see there's almost no real shiny bits. Now, things that are in the direction of the light still are brighter, but it's less shiny than it used to be. Now let me turn the roughness off and render it. And now you can see, it's just terrible. I went too far. These are all the reflecting shiny bits of our material. So I'm going to turn that back up from 0 because that seems to have broken the render a little bit. Ah, that looks much more shiny and less, the material looks glossy here and not rough. And that's what we're going to get with this. Now let me also now mess with the specularity here. Turn that up as well. And now that those reflective spots are brighter, if I turn specularity down, the reflective spots are duller or dimmer, but it can still feel like the material itself is still has like a gloss finish. So these are all related. Now we turn metallic all the way up. And now you can see it looks like it's made out of some kind of dark steel where it's both specular and smooth. There's also the ability for most metals to tint the light a little bit based on what it is. Now, in the real world, almost all metals, except for two, are grayscale. I don't know why. I'm not a material scientist. But except for copper, which has that orangish tint, and gold, which has the gold tint, everything else is grayscale. Silver is just a lighter gray, but with a highly shininess applied. In fact, let me change my base color to a bit brighter. And then I apply. Now it's really kind of shiny. Actually, let me go back to medium gray and see if I can get it with the metallic tint. Sheen tint. So this is going to be how much. I think that's the right one. F12. There we are. I don't know if I can set a sheen color. Nah, let's leave it alone. Transmission is if the material is translucent at all. This object isn't, but for giggles, let's take a look. We should actually see something behind it. I'm going to have to add something to the world. So I'm going to add a plane at the center, actually at the bottom here, and I'm going to scale it all the way up so we have something to reflect on. And let me add another one. Whoop. Actually, Alt-G. And now I'm just going to move it back a bit. Maybe I'm going to give this a bit of a color too. Maybe like a brownish. All right. I guess this one's not now that reflective after all. Let's see. Transmission roughness, index of refraction, clear coat. I think alpha is also, alpha is another factor for this. But anyway, I don't actually want to make this translucent, so I'm actually going to turn transmission off. All right. Let me add one more rectangle here. And give this another color as well. Just so I have something to contrast it off of. Not as bright. All right. You'll see why in a bit. We're going to see some colors reflecting off of it at some point. All right, back to this. I'm actually turn metallic down a little bit, turn specular up a bit more. Roughness, because I'm focusing on the blade first. I will make more materials later. And I do want this to be brighter, so I'm going to increase my base color brightness just a little bit. There we are. That's kind of the metallic look I'm going for. Let me even move the camera a bit further down. Make sure I see the reverb there. And lighting. Let's add or move the light up here. because I wanted to pick, there we are, I wanted to pick up some specularity on the blade from the light. That's pretty good for now. But the whole thing isn't this material. In fact, if we look at their source material, the flat of the blade, it seems to be a little less shiny than the edge of the blade. So let's go and jump into our material, our object here. I'm gonna full screen it, look around, flat view, edit mode. Now what I want to do is I'm going to go to face select mode, select nothing, and I'm going to select the flat of the blade. So, oh, and I got both sides. Cool, it looped. Wasn't sure it was going to do that. And here, now what I'm going to do is go back to my object. I'm now going to make a new material. Actually, where can I duplicate the material? Add new material. New material. It's going to be based off of the one we're already working with. Only now I want to duplicate it. Cool. So I've just duplicated the original material. In fact, I can rename this one to basically shiny metal. And I'm going to make this flat metal. And now here, for this part of it, I now need to assign, look at that, assign this material to that surface. So now, let's make this just a little bit darker. And then we're going to turn metallic way down and roughness way up. And we're going to see, it's hard to tell. I'm going to exaggerate it and make it much darker and much more rough, just to highlight that this is now different. I don't have to keep reassigning it. This material is now assigned to that. In fact, if I select nothing, I can select a material and hit select, and I'll get what it has selected. In fact, what I want to do, I want to make sure those materials aren't going to be applied to more than one surface. So let me select this. Oh no, it didn't select. Or maybe it's just slow. I think it's slow. Flat metal, select. Oh, it didn't assign. Maybe that's why I wasn't seeing anything. What is going on here? I seem to have some random properties assigned to edges here. Okay, that's weird. That's really weird. Oh, it's because of my hull. It's being confused by this. So let me. There we are. All right, I'm gonna turn that off for just a minute. And now with this material, assign that. Control I should invert my selection. And then I'm going to make sure that this is assigned to that. And now as I F12, much different. Okay, so you can see where I have selected the flat of the blade. I don't want it to be that extreme in practice, but in fact, I'm going to add another light just to make sure that we have some more more stuff to reflect on. Going back here, so I've got my flat metal, which again, I'm making it a little bit brighter. I don't want it to be that extreme of a difference. A little bit more. There. Yeah, I'll deal with that later. Now I want to actually work on another material, one other part of this. I want to work on the pommel. And I want to work on these guys on this side and that side. Oh, I'm going to have to do this the hard way. Control L, if I remember correctly, I modeled that in a way that it's technically not a continuous mesh between the skull, the pommel, and the grip. So I can just select and hit Control L, and it will select all other geometry that is linked to the one I have selected. I don't think I can do that here because I want the Now I've got the pommel and just that selected, and now I'm going to make another material. So new material, and I'm going to make this based on shiny metal, but I'm going to duplicate it, and I'm going to call this chrome. My base color is going to be brighter white. My subsurface color is also going to be white. My metallic is very white. Roughness is down. The rest of it's probably fine. I don't even need as much tint. Maybe I'll give it a clear coat too. Clear coat just, again, tries to make it look like we've got extra polish on it. All right. And now I'm going to select, oh, make sure that was assigned to what I have selected. There we go. That's even better. That's even better. Now I'm continuing with this metal application here. I'm going to select the grip, connect all that's linked, and now I'm going to make another color. I'm going to base it off of the original shiny metal. I'll make a new one, and we're going to call this the brass. And this brass color is going to be more of a yellow, orangey color, maybe a little bit brighter, and see what that looks like. Oh, I haven't actually assigned it yet, so assign brass to that, and now I've got the brass, and it picked up some of it. I maybe to make it a little bit less clear coated, a little less tint, a little less specular, a little less metallic, maybe a little bit more rough. There we are. Got a little bit of shine, but not much more. I don't have all the detail that's actually physically on the grip there. I just kind of roughed it out, so it's not going to look as good as my reference image here. Like, it's not going to have all that detail I just left off. Let's start doing some stuff work with the skull now. So the skull is going to be the first one that's going to be different. It's not metallic, it's bone-like. So let me select this, Control L. I think I've got the whole thing linked. Go to Z. Everything but the nostrils for some reason. Got the eye sockets, got the whole skull. Good. Once more, I'm going to make a new material, but I'm going to actually just click on new. I don't want this based off of one of the existing colors. So we're going to make a brand new one. We're going to assign it. Now we're going to render it. And, well, that's actually pretty good already. But let's see if we can get a little bit of that subsurface scattering going on that we've been talking about. So let me turn up subsurface. My subsurface color, I want to be a bit of a bone color, so I'm like a slightly orange, pinkish, yellowish here, but still not very saturated. It's still like lower the saturation. And F12. Now I've got like almost like a bone glow. I'll move that camera even a little tighter. I want the camera selected, not that. And grab ZZ, zoom on in, grab Z, grab XX, F12. Oh, now it almost looks like wax. Maybe a little too much. We can probably even turn the subsurface scattering down and change their base color a little bit as well. So once again, selecting this, working with our material that we're going to call bone. Turn the subsurface scattering down a bit. Give this also kind of a little bit of a bone-ish color. That's better. Some of the detail is lost in there, but that's what you get for using a smooth modifier. Maybe even be a little bit less saturated. Maybe a little bit darker. It's too pink. Less subsurface. All right, and for just looking at any other features I want to highlight right now. I talked about emission in the lighting one. Alpha should be translucency, but that has to actually be turned on, if I remember correctly. So I just turned the skull translucent, but it's not actually rendering as alpha. We actually have to tell the renderer to do that. So we have to click on under film transparencies. No, that turns on background transparencies. Under rendering properties. Oh, we are red green. So this needs to have alpha set. So black and white. That didn't do black and white. That's not right. Oh, that's how we would save the file. We can save it as black and white. We're still rendering it in color. And it is just a matter of going through every possible subsurface scattering. So this is global properties for subsurface scattering. How many samples, how much math you want to throw at it versus how long you want it to, how good you want it to look versus how long you want it to take to render. Indirect lighting. Now let's turn on transmission. Still not working. Blend mode. Alpha blend. There we go. We had to enable it there. Oh, but now that we have alpha blending working, and we have transmission working, and we have the alpha setting, we also now have index of refraction. So this is how much light bends as it enters our surface, and it will then bend again when it leaves our surface. The glass is very near 1, doesn't bend a lot. Water is more than 1. Diamonds are so shiny and sparkly because they've got an index of refraction of, I believe, if I remember correctly, 2, or at least in that neighborhood, so that the light bends and bounces off the different facets. One of the reasons why diamonds are so sparkly. Let's see what this looks like. Warping the stuff behind it. Now it's hard to tell because everything around it's not doing so well, but we can still mess with more properties for transmission. Transmission roughness makes it a little cloudier. And I think that's a rendering property too we can adjust, is ray traced lighting. Bake lighting indirectly. Diffuse bounces. That's indirect lighting. I want the direct lighting stuff. Ambient occlusion will allow light scattering off of things nearby to light things up as well. It is a lot more process intensive, but I'll turn it on and see what that looks like. All right, didn't really have a good example here. Depth of field if we're trying to fake cameras. Volumetric lighting, lighting clamp, volumetric shadows. This is layers, isn't it? These are layers. I think this is just for viewing purposes for our scene. Yes, this is the fun part of doing any 3D application, just going through all the options until you either find what you're looking for or you give up. What's this one? Particles. Physics. Constraints. Data properties. Now, it would be down here. It probably just a combination of my settings, and I don't really feel like going through every. So I'm going to choose the giving up option right here. But this is the basics on the ability to set down to a per face different materials so that when you render your object, it will, well, let me turn that back off. I don't actually want it translucent. And I have to turn the alpha back off. No, it's invisible. Why is it invisible? I've lost it. Oh, alpha 1. Alpha 1 is the... Ew. Oh. Oh, now it is doing the transmission index of refraction stuff. That's weird. Oh, I might have some issues with the normals on this thing. Control N, recalculate normals. Outside. F12. No, it's not the normals. No, it looks like it's still transmit parent some way, shape, or form. Yeah, I'm doing the bone. I know, I was just about to end this video too, and now I'm going down a rabbit hole. This is what happens. Now, back to being opaque. All right, that's it for this video. Follow up with some questions if you have them in the class discussion, and if I get some really good ones, I might warrant another video on this. So here's the next step. You have been asked to model a prop from a game, TV show, or movie, or whatever property that you like. Now I'm going to ask you to texture it accordingly. So you're going to give it the materials and set it to whatever it is you need it to be. Consider lighting, consider emissions, and then we'll do that as your next exercise. So this will be, I guess, exercise 3 or 2. I don't know, we'll find out. I'll set what the actual requirements are in Canvas and Discord. All right, take care. Hope this is helpful and not just boring watching me meander through options. All right, take care.